Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight for our college admissions panel. I'm Christina Wilson, Guidance Chairperson. I know what you're all thinking. It's almost time for Thanksgiving, and you're here, and you have a turkey to brine and a pie to bake. So we will keep this short, and our goal for tonight is to help our junior families cut through the noise and understand what truly makes a student stand out in the application process. We'll be gaining essential insight from admissions representatives on reviewing applications, understanding reach schools, writing authentic essays, and aligning academic and extracurricular choices with future goals. This event is made possible by the incredible organizational efforts of our dedicated counseling staff. A huge thank you to Greg Carollo, Gary McCarthy, Kieran Nordstrom, and Megan Williams for their hard work and commitment to our junior families. And now, please join me in offering a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. We appreciate you sacrificing a night of early Thanksgiving prep just to be here. Craig Broccoli from Binghamton University, Stephanie Gursky from Lafayette College, Phil Howard from the University of New Haven, Lori Wax from Penn State University, Janessa Dunn from Skidmore College, and Nicole Molina from Vanderbilt University. Now for some logistics. Our counselors will be handing out index cards if you wish to submit a question later on in the program. I know you all have great questions, but in the spirit of that early exit, please keep them brief. Both the college representatives and our counseling staff will be available to answer individual questions at the conclusion of our event.
That's what the essay, the main essay, really is, right? It's the one-size-fits-all in some ways, but it is the thumbprint. It is the elevator pitch. It is the space of why should we care, and I say that lovingly, but why should we be invested in a conversation with the student, right? The reason why we have so much emphasis in that writing space is because for many institutions who are selective and are curating a holistic review, the writing is really just the student. The grades have 4 years to build. The recommenders are recommending, but those are other voices. Extracurriculars, just as mentioned, are things that have built up over time because those are the passion projects of the student, and we want to see that. But the words are creating the student space to be 3D to us. They are basically from 2D to 3D of who they are from themselves. And so we lean in that because we're trying to hear the student. And so when we say that authentic voice, we're thinking about what's their elevator pitch. What is the thing that they are standing on? And that also curates that value set for what's important to the student. To really jump on the example that was given, the student using the motorcycle, right? They wanted to share something about themselves that deeply they were excited to talk about, and that's why it jumped off the page. Not to say that mundane things aren't exciting. There is beauty in the mundane, and it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So having the students or your students really think about what are they standing on, what are their values, and what are they excited about, allows their voice to come through, and that's what we mean by authentic. Anissa? Awesome.
Okay, so item number 2 is entitled Understanding and Discussing Reach Schools. Let's dive in with a definition as we can. How would you define a reach college in the most practical terms, keeping in mind the audience is probably 16 or 17-year-olds?
So most schools will have an academic profile or middle 50% ranges. So a reach school might be a school where you're really not in the ranges or on the low end of the ranges of the academic profile. Probably the most straightforward. But there are always nuances to every application process. There are factors that are not just straight grades, which is why we encourage students to, it's always good to try for a reach school, a school that might not be, the other word I guess would be target, where you're fitting right into the academic profile, because there are other factors involved. But a reach is, generally speaking, a school where you're kind of below what the academic profile is.
I mean, that's the standard, right? When you're looking at schools and you're looking at your academic figures and you're maybe in one category, high school, transcript-wise, GPA-wise, you might be in there, but maybe test score-wise, if it's a test officer school, you're not in those ranges. That could trigger, oh, that's a bit of a reach, vice versa. But also a reach school, let's just think, broadly speaking, mentally speaking, it's on the back of our minds, a school that we want to get into, but we don't think we can get into, or thinking about it another way. We're spending a lot of our energy imagining, if only I could get admitted to that school, then the process was worth it. So it's already a school that you kind of know there's something underneath, and maybe you're looking at their statistics, their acceptance rate is a figure we tend to look at. Even if you're in the ranges, but they're a highly selective school, that's a reach school, right? They're not accepting every single student who's in those academic ranges. Mathematically, that would be a reach school for most students. The concept here is that you're trying to make sure that when you're looking at reach schools, I would say schools that you get excited about, schools you want to be at, but schools you're being really thoughtful about, that there are a few of them on your list, because that wouldn't be the goal, just to get into a reach. I understand I'm saying something here, but because beginning the process, we often are looking at what are our reach schools, what are the schools we're aiming towards. That helps you kind of mentally focus on what they are, but then you're doing kind of what Lori says, making sure you're paying attention to the math side. Are they actually a mathematical reach? Which probably they are. You're going to have some back and forth. I would assume conversation with your counselors here about, yeah, these are your reach schools. That verifies that. So it's a nuanced process. That's why I brought it out in that way. It's not just a simple yes or no, is it a reach? You're going to have a back and forth discussion about that.
So thank you, Lori and Craig. And those conversations about reach schools are happening now. They're happening in your homes. They're happening in the school counseling office right around the corner. And just to affirm, what happens, what does it look like? What does it sound like at Byram Hills when a student has a reach school? So how might a counselor respond to that? So a counselor might say, what is your top school? What are you shooting for? Once you decide that, we'll support you in every way that we can. So the approach that we use in our department is kind of, it's dialectic, right? We're honoring that aspiration, but at the same time, we want to keep the student grounded with the historical data as well. So with that said, now that the panel kind of has an understanding of what sort of happens in our offices, we'd love to hear some other comments about reach schools. Perhaps how would you advise parents when those difficult conversations are happening at home? How would you advise students, or how would you advise us as school counselors?
I think it's important for students and families to have a conversation about what's optimal in terms of what the students are looking for, and what's ideal in terms of academic programs, in terms of support services, in terms of locations, all of these factors that go into it. In terms of coming up with the list of schools that students are looking at, and making it more practical and realistic options that students are considering. And, a lot of students will, look at applying to a number of different schools. But I think when you have more of a balance of schools that are more academically fit for that student, I think in terms of a realistic chance of getting in safety schools, you just want to have more of a balance. And I think that would be helpful as you have those discussions with students and families.
And I'll just add to what Phil has shared about really thinking about the balance of schools. And I would like to provide an example. It may or may not align with myself in this way, but coming from this perspective of being in a liberal arts college, but also finding that from my experience, a person or student who majored in chemistry, wanted to play the oboe in the orchestra, minored in Spanish, who ended up at a four-year regional Hullock University in Southeast Georgia.
and then transitioned into medium-sized liberal arts university, medium-sized research one university, and landed at a small liberal arts college. And the reason why I share that example is that I personally could see myself at every single one of those types of institutions. More than one in that space was not necessarily designed with my interest in mind to be able to do all of those things. And so when you think about the authenticity aspect that Nicole mentioned a little bit earlier regarding what is that heartbeat, what is your elevator pitch? Is it your academic interest in becoming an engineer while also wanting to become an entrepreneur? What type of space will help cultivate that for me in the way that is designed for me? And that goes back down to fit at the end of the day. It's a spectrum when it comes down to those interests and that alignment. But the reason why I share that is that it's possible that there is more than one type of institution that may be in alignment with your student, and to keep an open mind when it comes down to it. I will share with you, I was a liberal arts kid at a very large university. I did well. I had really wonderful support, but that structure was not designed for me to do it. I had to force it in that particular space. And so really thinking about those experiences, but also not only the outcome, but also the journey and the type of environment that you also want to ensure that your student is able to embrace.
Our next topic is addressing privilege and context in admissions. Admission officers come from diverse backgrounds, and students do too. A question we often hear from families is about how a well-resourced student is viewed in the admissions review process. And to just kind of ground this a little bit for everybody, it's the idea that a student may have all kinds of opportunities and experiences, but how do those experiences hold together? How do they harmonize or form a synergy and a unique voice that speaks effectively through the application? So our question is, how does your institution consider a student's context when reviewing an application? And for students who are well-resourced, how can they use those opportunities, internships, travel, enrichment, etc., in a way that enhances their application authenticity? So I'll just put that out there to any of matters.
What a lovely place to be with lots of privilege. Who doesn't love that? I mean, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? And I start that way because amazing. We're able to see students who have nothing but opportunity to be able to engage, to be able to challenge, to be able to really ask bigger questions. Amazing. I got that. And what do they learn from that? That's the piece that we're hoping to see. There's nothing wrong with being able to have exposure. How worldly of you. We are a global society. And how have you managed to engage? How have those civil discourse opportunities really presented? How have those moments of critical thinking and assessment been challenged in a way that the student can express themselves? That's how we're thinking about it. We want to be able to see that the student has maximized their opportunities. It's like going to a different country and not trying their cuisine. Why would you do that? Just stay home, right? So in thinking about what those opportunities for the students are, yes, how amazing that they have exposure more than most, but we're not thinking about it that way. We are thinking about it in that context of this student has an exposure. What have they done with it? What have they learned from it? How are they living through that vibrancy to be able to make that impact in another community that they are leaning towards? That's the piece that we're hoping for. We're not shaming a student for having opportunity, but we are questioning what are they doing with it, right? And so in that kind of frame of community building that we keep referencing, how is the student who may have seen the world more, how are they going to lead in that space for someone who may not have seen it like that? How are they going to build those opportunities for others and that trajectory of community to really impart those experiences? And I think that's the difference, right? How is that really being able to be showcased via the student in the spaces of the application so that we can potentially or foresee how they would react or even handle anything that comes their way once they get to our campus.
Stephanie, could you maybe bring that down to a little bit more of a grounded level in terms of when you guys see applications? How do you have a sense? You know, when the activities, the experiences are kind of harmonizing and coming together. Like maybe give us a sense of what does that look like and how do you guys perceive it at the maybe that will help us a little bit on a more grounded level.
So I think sometimes that we see a lot of students do these pre-college programs, and that's great. You're able to go out, you're able to explore, and maybe you're interested in engineering, you go do a pre-college program, and you love it, and you have decided that engineering is for you, or you actually come away from it, maybe with some great friendships, but you decided engineering is not what I really want to study. That is okay. That's something that you're trying out, and you're having that experience and making those connections. I think for having all of the things come together, I think that's also another question later on, but we do not need things to specifically be all connected. You don't need to have your activities be all connected with your major. For example, the physics and the music, those things don't really go together. They don't have to be connected like that. We at Lafayette, we are, one of our mottos is Quran, which means why not in Latin, and we're looking for students who are kind of exploring different areas, doing different things that are outside of the box, and they're not afraid to do things that are different.
My favorite question to ask college reps is to share an example of their favorite essays that they've ever written. So I promise that question's coming. We'll just think on that for a sec. But the next item is about essays. It's about essays and the power of authentic voice. So as we shift to that, we're going to talk about this particular component of the application, that is the essay. Now, just to ground us as well, there are two pieces, right? When we talk about the essay, there's the personal statement that goes to every school that you apply to. And then traditionally, a good amount of colleges are also going to ask for a supplemental essay in addition as well. So to start us off, what distinguishes a truly strong main essay, personal statement, or a supplemental essay from one that is simply well-written?
I will share for a supplemental question. So we have a supplemental question, just one. It's why Lafayette. And something that I really enjoy reading is examples that students are giving me. We don't want it to read, your answer to read like the website, like a brochure. We know that our student to faculty ratio is 10-1. We know that. But if you are on our website and you are reading an article, you came across an article where one of our geology professors took some students to Alaska and did some research, and you saw that and you thought it was so cool, and you talked about that in your supplemental answer to our question of why Lafayette. That's great, and that shows that you have done your research, and it's an answer of actually why you're interested in our institution. We're looking for a genuine response. It really could be anything, but we wanted to read not like a brochure, not like the website, not AI. Sometimes students will copy and put it into AI, and they will copy and paste the actual prompt, like write a 200-word essay of why Lafayette. I'm interested in psychology. And then ChatGPT says, here's your response. And they actually copy, here's your response, and they include that. So we don't want to see that. So really try to get in and give specific examples is something that I think helps with a well-written supplemental.
I'm going to add a little bit to this thought of where the essays are in our current day and age. And I'm going to say this in the lens of the world that we live in, where we're applying to way more colleges than we ever applied to before us collectively. We'll just pick on a county. We'll pick on Westchester County, but it happens everywhere. You're applying to more schools than you reasonably can even decide between at the end of the day. What that does means we're getting a lot more essays in front of us. We have actually far less time to read those essays than ever before. Granted, I'll make a broader argument. We still spend a really significant amount of time trying to understand the context of the student in most cases, and the essay is one good way of doing that. But a good essay is well written, you get the point across, it answers the prompt. This is towards the personal statement, right, that you might see on the Common App. And it's doing that in a way that we can feel the student through that in the best way possible, where it's not something that you look at that and say, this doesn't match what I'm looking elsewhere. There's some level of authenticity there. But maybe a really good essay is one that understands the nuances of writing clearly. Like, this is a hard thing for a high school student to get to, and it always has been, but it's gotten a little harder for a really good essay. It's like, yeah, this person's going to spend minutes reading this, and I spent a long time trying to craft it, but it gets to the point, right? It's not trying to lose the reader with its creative writing in some respects, because frankly, that's probably not the best use of a college essay. That's where it gets harder in these days, and I think it creates this pressure that you need a tool to help you write that essay, but it misses the point. The essay is not about who wrote the best essay, therefore they're more admissible than the other person. It's more so making sure we understand who that student is, so then when we're going through our list of things we're looking for, we can say, yeah, I do see this student on our canvas. Academics and all things else match up, but also this essay is really helping me understand how this student's thinking. It wasn't just because we were wowed by the essay, but we felt that student, how they were clearly answering that point. So the hard part is try to make sure at the end of the day it's distilled down to a really digestible argument of sorts of who this student is.
I jump in on supplements. So when it comes to supplement questions, they basically, regardless of how they're worded, it's basically a why, just a step, like why our school. And plot twist, it's meant to be hard because I don't think any student really knows why that college. I know, shocker. Everyone's like, what? I know. But the way that I have helped students and families think about this question is many of our institutions are very similar. I mean, there's how many of us, and we all have green space. Yes. New building that we're paying for? Yes. Students from all over? Yes. Students who are interested? Yes. Happy students on our brochures, because no one likes a sad cloud. Green. And we all have a bookstore whose rental rate is $52.99 for a sweatshirt, plus tax. Fun fact. And so when we're asking the students why, we know that they're sitting there like, well, I want to go to your school because I want to learn. But that's not what we're asking. We're asking of all the schools that are so similar and are doing the same thing, because math is math at all of our schools, why our school? Why do you believe that our school will help you reach that goal in mind of what success looks like for you? Yes, it could be the trip to Antarctica. Or maybe, yes, it is a space that you have loved so genuinely that you couldn't imagine flourishing or thriving anywhere else. We're asking you to share that with us. And it's a hard question because I love all of my shoes equally, but all my shoes don't do the same thing. Some of them are for comfort, some of them are for style, and some of them I spend way too much money on because it was my birthday. But that's okay, right? But you can only wear one pair. And I think when it comes to college itself, when we're thinking of you and our communities, we want you to do the same. Can you see yourself in our community successfully and thriving? Do we actually have the tools for you to succeed? And is it in a reasonable fashion that you have done your homework of really thinking about what it would mean to get that admit letter and go tomorrow, right? I think adding a little weight of, if I could get admitted tomorrow, would I actually go, is something that would help me in the description of why that's. And yes, some of you may be stuck with, oh, I just know that they have a great program, but I don't know anything else. And that's okay too. But I can tell you something, there's probably another student that thought a little longer as to why. And so make sure that as you're helping navigate your student to this why question, help them think about it, right? Thinking about the subjects that they love, thinking about the areas that they are passionate about. Do we as institutions have those spaces for them to thrive? We have a lot of things for a lot of students. Well, we don't have everything for everyone. And it's for you to determine if that fit for you is there in us. Because we can make it work, right? We have biology, but we may not have, marine biology. May seem the same, but unless you want to study catfish in Nashville, we're probably not the place for you, right? Thinking about it that way, I think, helps size up if we are a good space or not. And I'll end with this. We're also checking to make sure that you know who you are applying to. So Vanderbilt is spelled Vanderbilt. It is not spelled Duke. Thank you.
So here's my favorite question. Can you share an example of an essay that felt especially genuine or memorable, and why?
Penn State is no longer requiring the essay other than for our honors college. But, and I think Craig made a really good point of if we have to take the time to figure out what you're talking about, we don't have the time to do that, so to be sure it's really clear. But I think you never know who's reading your essay, so it's really important to not be offensive in any way, not show any kind of bias in any way. I think one that always stood out for me was a student was writing about her parents were divorced, and sometimes you see people are angry at their parents, and that is written about in the essay. There's all kinds of things that get written in essays. It's like your students' time to share everything that's on their mind sometimes. But this student was just talking about it in such a positive way. She talked about her two worlds, and there was, the world, I guess one was in the suburbs and one the city, and just had a very positive spin. And so what I really got out of that was here was somebody who was making lemonade out of lemons, who was really looking at the positive side. That was, who doesn't want to be with somebody who was looking at the positive side? So that was something that stood out. But thanks.
One of my favorite essays was probably 8 or 9 years ago at this point in time. It was a fabulous student who was interested in child development, ultimately to become a psychologist. But they decided to write their essay about their favorite family's road trip. This particular student was from the Heartland region, Ohio, and was making their way to North Carolina and stumbled upon a Sheetz gas station. Are y'all familiar with Sheetz? Some of y'all? How many of y'all are familiar with Wawa, Buc-ee's? Okay, so that's the North Carolina version in that space. But this particular student was enamored by Sheetz, so much so that she wrote about the screen where you can go and order everything you want with all of the condiments and then walk yourself all the way down to the end of the counter, and it's voila, it's there. And what I love about this student is that she equated her experience going to Sheetz to a road trip to Walt Disney World. She felt that she was going into an amusement park. This was a 650-word essay, not more than that. That was better within the common application. At the time, I think there were 6 topics instead of 7. But for that particular student, what they did was not only write about that road trip, but the way that they wrote it was so whimsical, so creative, and so fun in many different ways that I had no doubt that this particular human being would be a fantastic child psychologist. This was a wonderful opportunity because this was a program where she was aligned specifically to a major within a college. But it was one road trip. It was a gas station that she talked about, that it was a slice of her life, not the experience that she had student teaching. We already learned about that from her recommenders. We already learned about her grades at different spaces. It was something that was personable for her, that was able to show her personality. And I will share with you, I did back around to this student's college counselor. She has since graduated. She's doing beautifully post her experience in college. And it's funny because her parents were like, I don't know if you'll want to send this essay. This is too beyond the box. But actually, it was absolutely perfect in a hyper-competitive environment for her to see beyond the grades.
Okay. Our next topic is academic extracurricular alignment.
You touched on that, but maybe we can amplify just a bit. As students plan for their senior year and think about majors, parents often wonder how much it matters that a student's courses and activities align with their intended field. we have 2 questions. We'll start with one and then we'll flip to the second one. First one is, how important is alignment between the student's curriculum, extracurricular involvement, and intended major? That's always something we kind of work together with students to kind of negotiate, work on. But Craig, could you start us off with that?
Yeah, in general, if you're doing well, you're here at Byram Mills and you're working along the path that you're on, 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, the basics, I'm speaking on behalf of Binghamton, but in a general picture, you're fine to enter just whatever that major is in the future without really any restrictions, the exception being engineering and in business. So we do tend to want to make sure you're on the math path a bit more than the average. I'm saying it in this framework in the sense that you do not have to line up your high school career to be a college graduate. To enter college, we want to make sure students are ready for that first semester of whatever that class would look like. And generally, engineering and business tends to want to have calculus in the beginning. So you want to be ready for that. But we're not necessarily looking for students to craft their senior year with a mission to do what they need to do to get into college for that specific major. Partly because the data on the other end, when they get to our institutions, they change their mind 15 times. And if we were spending all this time waiting for them to find their path senior year just to change it, it would be a barrier for admissions. So we're trying to avoid that. The exceptions being what I mentioned. That doesn't mean you cannot go out there and explore a bit, right? If you wanted to make sure you took another extra language because you're thinking about maybe studying the languages at the next level, awesome. If you wanted to go outside the classroom a bit and get involved, clubs, organizations, or internship-wise in that area that you're thinking about, awesome. Like that's great. But it would be less so for admissions and more so for personal growth and exploring.
Thanks, Greg. Lori, maybe this next one, let's maybe sharpen this a little bit. There is always that important factor of, well, I do want to study this major, or like Craig said, I think I do. Maybe not, we're not sure, but I think I do. There is a piece of that would also seem to be, well, you do have to get it, you do have to take certain courses to prepare yourself. So maybe you could speak to that kind of nuts and bolts side of the equation here.
Right. So Penn State has actually moved away from a holistic review. I'm sure you've all heard the term holistic review. We're looking at all the different pieces of the application. And what we really are doing at this point is a very deep dive into the numbers, into a student's academic record. And it is very much based on the program. For us, it's the academic college. We have 12 of them. So based on the academic college. And yes, there are different requirements for different academic colleges. As Craig mentioned, engineering and business. Any of our STEM fields are looking for a minimum of pre-calc. Probably most people will have calc at that point. But so if you are thinking about, you're not sure what you want to major in, but maybe there's a possibility that you want to, to major in engineering or business, it is always really a good idea to at least understand what the requirements are for different majors and then have them if you're applying into that major. While we're not doing a holistic review anymore, there are definite, and we are looking at an academic record. It's not just a straight number because it really does depend on what program a student is applying to, even though they do often change their minds. But that is something that is a factor. So definitely, go onto websites, look up what requirements are for certain majors, and just make sure when you're choosing your student, just choosing their schedule, that they have that. We have had a few issues with actually Algebra 2. There are a few schools, some really top public schools here in Westchester even, that changed the curriculum or the name of the course, and it didn't cover Algebra 2 as he thought it needed to, and so we weren't even able to admit students, and we're now working with these schools to make sure that what they're putting in the curriculum is matching up with what we're looking for. So you definitely, these are conversations to have certainly with your awesome school counselors, and you really do have an awesome counseling department here. And then also, on any college website for any program, it'll list what the requirements are.
Okay, before we get to the parent questions, one more, and this question is about AI in college admission. With the growing use of artificial intelligence in college admissions, can you share how your institution is or is not using AI to review application materials such as essays, recommendations, and transcripts?
We're not using AI for application. Sometimes I wish we were. I wish we could. I wish AI was good enough for that. Under the pretense, to be fair, this is a really good question. I mean, colleges, like at the end of the day, we're admissions offices at the very least, are tasked with admitting students that hit our number, right? So say we have 3,000 spots. You need to have 3,000 students in those spots. Not really many more, definitely not any less. But those students have to not only get it and be okay first, semester, ideally the whole year, and then that they're returning for that second year. Usually if they're returning the retention rate that we would use for their second year, they're fine. They're going to graduate in the 4-year window typically. They're going to be awesome alumni. They're doing these great things. That's hard to do. There's a lot of risk in that. And I don't think any college would like to take the risk of just simply admitting students based off a predictive algorithm that says, yeah, these students are going to be fine. And then you find out in the short future that you made a huge mistake and you're spending your next 2 admission cycles filling in all the spaces where students may have left or failed out, frankly, and then still trying to get those other students for those 3,000 incoming areas. Now, things like transcript review, I would imagine in the long run that could be an easier thing for AI to do under the pretense that they match with what we're doing in terms of how we would read as readers. But for the vast majority of the admissions process, it's based into things that are hard for tools like AI to do. In an if, just putting the if out there for the colleges that may start to dabble in this realm, let's just think big picture. Maybe some of you out there are involved in the technology space here. It's going to be for areas where it's less important that you need the perfect match for that school. Maybe they have a whole lot of space for a whole lot of different students, and it's less nuanced in their admissions process. The AI part is somewhat irrelevant in sort of like the selectivity part of it. So that's where I just want to put a big picture there. I like where the world is going in the sense we can use tools to help. It just hasn't really been a big thing for admissions scene yet. I think it's been far bigger on the other side where students think they need to use that for admissions, but it's less important on our end at this stage.
I was just going to say, even with over 140,000 applications, last year we were not using AI to figure out what we're looking at or reading students' academic records.
Same thing at the University of New Haven. AI is not a factor in reviewing applications as we go through the process and do take a holistic review of the student's application. So we will look at everything that's submitted, but AI doesn't really play much of a role.
I was just going to jump in and say, wow, I was reading files this morning. Didn't even know that other folks may have another tool for that. But I don't want to lead with, oh, it's not a big deal. It's here, right? We see it, we hear about it. And I read an interesting article that had linked this new wave of AI, ChatGPT or what have you, to back in the early days of Microsoft Office Suite, where Excel was introduced. And folks were like, a machine is going to count for me. And I sat there and I was like, what an interesting concept, because I know a lot of people that don't know how to do a pivot table as long as Excel has been around. And I think this is the way that AI may be used, right? And it will be a tool that will help in other spaces or places, but I don't think it will completely override the human side or the human value of a voice when we're thinking of curating community. Maybe it'll be a counter, maybe it'll help with some data sets that may be needed of curating, when we're doing our profiles. But the ideas of the words and the commitment that the students and counselors are making to put an application together is not lost on us on this side who are sitting here very gainfully employed, reading and really assessing the students. So I don't want to say it's not a big deal, I'm here, but I don't want this to hearken on a fear where back when Microsoft Office was announced, everyone thought that, the machines are taking over. And you probably know someone who doesn't know how to do a pivot table in Excel.
Okay. I was told by the control room that we're going to transition now to the parent questions. Okay. This is also told it's a speed round. So that means just one answer. Okay, so I'll just throw these questions out and direct them to one of our paths.
Okay. Let's see. Why don't we start with Phil? We'll start with you.
At what point in the admissions process is the essay read?
Essay is read as part of the application review. So as I'm going through an application, I will go step by step and go through the process to look at all of the students' information that they are submitting on the application, and it's probably the last step that I'll do because it's the most time-consuming. But as we make our decision-making process, they go through it. It's probably one of the last stages of the application review process.
Thank you. Okay, Nicole, maybe you'll take this next one. Okay.
Do colleges limit the number of offers to a particular high school regardless of the number of qualified applicants?
We do not have a quota on either a high school or a number of students that will take from a certain region or space. We are thinking about the students in their context and how they're being presented. And on this side, I just say this side, from the enrollment side, we are thinking of our own institutional priorities along with what we are seeing within the pool itself. It is not in a silo of the student in certain high schools amongst other students within that high school.
Very good. Let's see, Stephanie, this one for you. How does yield play into decision-making for students that fit profile but applied regular decision?
The students that apply regular decision, those are the students that we want to say yes. And so they should definitely come back to campus if they have already hit or if they haven't been. They should come back to some of our admittance student day events or just take the month. Usually you have a little bit of March, some of April, sometimes more. Usually May 1st is the day that you have to make your final decision and enroll in a college. And you have a couple weeks of time to decide and look at all of your offers, but it's definitely time to connect with your admissions counselor, with students maybe that you know. I always share this tip too. If you're on a tour, ask your tour guides questions, but also maybe just go up to a random student that's sitting in the dining hall and ask them about their experience. Tour guides have, they've been trained, but ask a regular student that's just there. But I think it's definitely, that's the regular decision students, we want them to say yes to us. And so we do a lot during usually the month of April is our yield season to try to get students to say yes to us.
Thank you. Okay, Craig, this one's for you. Can you elaborate on the movement away from a holistic review mentioned by Lori? Is this a broader trend? What does it mean more specifically?
Well, I mean, what does holistic review mean anyway, to begin with? I mean, I say that because we all use it, or in some cases don't use it. When we use it in the definition, holistic means we look at everything that you submit to us, that we ask, but we all use it differently in the sense of what matters more to us. Is there a broader movement away? I would say colleges are more conscious to what matters most to them more than ever. Again, I was making the statement about more and more applications. There's not more students. We're all focused on yield. What are the things that help us figure out who's going to be a good student but also say yes to us? Holistic review in many cases does help you dial in onto the yield. So we're looking at all those little metrics that make a student who traditionally would enroll on our campus. So I'd say most colleges still have to focus on that. The school can move away from it because they have enough evidence to say, we know that we could admit 50 blind work students, 50 students from Scarsdale, 50, I'm just using numbers, right? And it works out, right? We are then still focused on, are these students going to be quality students on our campus? That ultimately is going to be the biggest factor. There's a huge focus on that. When we get down into a holistic review, it matters during the timeline, and I think you're answering this a little bit from the one we read, but if a student applies early or a student applies regular, the amount of time that we may be spending on those students over that whole length of review months, we might circle back to students. And that's where that holistic review really, I got cut off. I talked for too long. But I'm giving you a lot more than the question's probably asking for, because I think we put so much weight into the term holistic as if it's universally applied by every single school. We all may use it in different ways in different parts of the review process. So I try to make sure it's more convoluted than we all think it is.
Or you want to add something?
So I just want to add that even schools that are doing a holistic review, I mean, first and foremost, for I would say all of us, academic record is the most important factor. So even when we were doing a more holistic review, if you had the grades, if you had really tough grades, you were getting admitted. And if you didn't, there wasn't a lot of extra stuff that was going to be enough to make that difference. There was more of a kind of gray area, middle of the road where that came in. But for the most part, there are, as Greg said, priorities, and it's generally going to be academic record. I think a lot of times the holistic reviews tend to be more kind of tiebreakers in a sense, and so much has to do with how much your yield is and how many students you actually, if you're going to fill your class no matter what, it's maybe you're not focused as much on that.
Janessa Agui, this one. How are undecided students being viewed in the application process?
Yes, I love this question because coming from my lens, every single student is admitted as an undecided or undeclared student. So for us, yes, we have students who want to hit the ground running. I want to major in political science, international affairs. I want to pursue studio art, et cetera, et cetera. But our curriculum is designed for students to explore. And they had built-in time to make that decision intentionally, still graduating in 4 years. Okay. In that regard, but also being able to know that you're going to take advantage of the wide breadth and depth of our curriculum and also explore areas that you may not have even thought of. At the end of the day, for us, an undecided student is the best type of student to prepare that student for life after our institution, especially for jobs that don't exist yet.
Thank you. Septi, what rule should a student use when applying to a test, up to a test optional school?
Look on their website for their middle 50%, or if you got a brochure what they were here visiting, look in there. It should be very clearly on there. You can also look at a school's common data set, which has a lot of information, but if you're someone who finds that interesting, it could be good to look through there. If you fall in their middle 50%, then you can definitely probably submit your test scores and it will occur you. That's usually what I tell students. I will say that we've seen more students this year. I don't know about for the other institutions up here, but we've seen more students this year definitely submitting test scores than in the past. Last year we only had 37% of students, and this year we're not at the deadline yet, but I'm definitely reading a lot of applications where test score. So, but look up middle 50%, and if you fall in that, then go ahead and usually you can submit it.
Okay, Craig, I'm going to throw you one of the more philosophical questions. Okay, students now apply to upwards of 20 schools, which has made schools seem more selective. Are schools really more selective than in the past?
No, generally speaking, they're not. They may be in a nuanced way a bit more selective, and there's a lot of reasons for that. This goes back into, I love how that term that you were using about finding the top school, not the reach school, the top school. The top school doesn't and maybe shouldn't be the most selective school of the schools if you're interested in. Because that's the game that I think we're all pushing us towards, like applying to more schools, but also applying to more and more selective schools just based on acceptance rates, but missing some of the nuances behind the scenes. And frankly, people, we love to tell you kind of what we do, how we read, and what's important to us. We may give you some of those nuances of how we focus on certain things, so feel free to reach out to us. If you're applying to 10 schools and 4 of them are towards the top end of your list, you could talk to us about the 4 of those schools you really want to focus on. Parents, you're allowed to talk to us too, but sometimes you want your students to ask that question. It helps them in the long run, and it helps us. But Generally speaking, schools are not getting more selected. I'm saying this because of just pay attention to the demographics here. There are not more students, and we're all in the Northeast. There are not more students in the Northeast. Yeah, we pull in students from all over the place, but we still heavily rely on our students from here in the Northeast. So if you're looking at these type of schools that you're traditionally thinking of, we're trying to make sure we can get all those students and yield them. I would say at a big picture for this area, we're not more selective.
Thank you. And the last question is a question that we hear over and over again. So thank you to whomever wrote it. I think it's a good one. It's perennial, and we're gonna toss it over to Nicole. Okay, Nicole, you ready for this one? Not like we haven't heard this one. What does admissions value more, high GPA or number of AP classes?
I'm going to go with both. And now Helen and no brother. I mean, to be fair, we want the students to be able to get the grades. Yes, we want the A's. We want the grade on the fridge, right? Do students still do that? Is there a student in the house? Do you still do that? Put it on the fridge. But we also want to see that the student has challenged themselves academically, kind of like working out that academic muscle so that they're flexing for us, so that we can see that they've built a foundation, so that when they get to us, they've already had exposure, they've already had the prep, and they were able to do it in a space that they felt comfortable and confident in. So it is really both. We want to see the good grades, and we want to see the academic challenge. Now, if your school has 25 APs, we don't want to see 25. We want to see 23. Leave some room for other people. I'm kidding. No one's it. But we do want to see that the student has challenged themselves, right? We want to be able to know that when they get to us, they're going to be fine, or they have at least had exposure enough to then know where some of the spaces or places that they may need to ask questions when they get to us, they can do. So ultimately, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for rich discussion, questions, really thoughtful answers, and I would say very honest answers. And that was our goal for tonight, and I think we met it and then some, and we really cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing all of your wisdom and your thoughts with our parents. So thank you very much.
Yes, I just want to add one thing. I think for any of the questions that were asked tonight, the standard answer many of us often give is it depends. There could be a different answer from each of us for any of the questions. And as Craig said, we are all here. We are available. Please reach out to us if you want to know how things are done at our specific institutions. Just reach out, give me the answer.
And Lori, that was a perfect segue into our reps have graciously agreed to stay behind. They're going to come down and be here, and you can please, have a conversation with them. Our counselors will be in the cafeteria if you'd like to come over and talk with them. If you don't know who your child's counselor is, I have a list. Come see me. But thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving.